Maya Rodriguez stared at the smoking wreckage that used to be her hyperdrive and wondered if the universe had a personal vendetta against her. Her cargo hauler, the Rusty Bucket, had picked the absolute worst possible moment to break down. Not near a space station, not near a trade route. No, it had to be on Dust Bowl Prime, a planet so boring that even the rocks looked depressed. "Well, this is just fantastic," she muttered, kicking a piece of twisted metal that had once been her navigation array. 3 months behind on ship payments, carrying a cargo hold full of protein bars that expired during the Clinton administration. And now I'm stranded on a planet that makes desert worlds look like tropical paradises. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, nothing but red dirt, jagged rocks, and the occasional tumbleweed that looked like it had given up on life. According to her charts, Dust Bowl Prime had exactly 3 permanent residents, all miners working a barely profitable asteroid processing station. The kind of people who probably considered a good day to be one where nothing exploded. Maya grabbed her emergency kit and started hiking toward what her scanner claimed was the mining settlement. After 2 hours of trudging through dust that got into places dust had no business being, she heard something that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was a groan. Not a human groan, mind you, but something that sounded like a landslide with indigestion. Following the sound led her to a narrow canyon where she discovered the source of the noise. Wedged between 2 rock walls was the biggest lizard she had ever seen. And by biggest, we're talking the size of a small shuttlecraft. It had scales that might have been silver once but were now dulled with age and dirt, wings that looked like torn sails, and eyes the size of dinner plates that regarded her with what she could only describe as profound embarrassment. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Maya said. "Of all the uninhabited canyons on all the backwater planets in all the galaxy, I had to walk into yours." The creature made another sound, softer this time, almost like a whimper. That's when Maya noticed how thin it looked. Those massive ribs were showing through its hide, and its head drooped like it barely had the strength to hold it up. Maya looked at her emergency rations. 3 protein bars, each one about as appetizing as cardboard soaked in regret. Then she looked at the creature, which was definitely dying of hunger, and made what was probably the stupidest decision of her life. "All right, big guy," she said, unwrapping the first bar. "I don't know what you are, but nobody should starve alone." She tossed the protein bar toward the creature's massive head. A tongue the size of a carpet unrolled and snatched it up. The look of gratitude in those enormous eyes almost made her forget how completely screwed she was. Maya had just thrown her second protein bar when the impossible happened. The creature spoke. "I must say, that was extraordinarily kind of you, young lady." Maya blinked. Then she blinked again. Then she wondered if the thin atmosphere was making her hallucinate. "Did you just talk?" "Indeed I did, though I must apologize for not introducing myself sooner. Social graces tend to suffer when one is slowly starving to death." The creature's voice was deep and refined, like a Shakespearean actor with a smoking habit. "I am Admiral Pyrion Flamewright, formerly of the Draconic Stellar Armada. Though most folks around these parts just call me Grandpa Smokestack." "Dragon," Maya said slowly. "You're a dragon. An actual fire-breathing, fairy-tale dragon." "Well, yes, though the fire-breathing is more of a young dragon thing. At my age, I'm lucky if I can manage a decent belch." "And fairy tales?" Pyrion snorted, which produced a small puff of smoke. "Please. We were exploring the galaxy when your species was still trying to figure out which end of a stick to hold." Maya sat down heavily on a rock. "Okay, let me get this straight. You're a space dragon, a space admiral dragon, and you're stuck in a canyon on the worst planet in the known universe." "Crashed here about 40 years ago," Pyrion admitted, looking sheepish. "Navigation error." "Well, if I'm being honest, it was more of a flying while intoxicated situation. There was this celebration on Vega Prime, and the Centaurian brandy was flowing freely, and well, one thing led to another." 40 years. Maya stared at him. Why didn't you call for help? Pyrion's massive head drooped even further. Pride, my dear. Foolish, stubborn pride. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to crash land on a backwater planet because you can't hold your liquor? I'm supposed to be a legendary fleet commander, not some drunken lizard who can't tell port from starboard. Maya pulled out her last protein bar and tossed it over. So you've been stuck here for 4 decades because you were too embarrassed to call a tow truck? When you put it like that, it does sound rather ridiculous. Pyrion caught the bar with surprising grace. But every year I told myself I'd fix my ship myself, and every year it got a little more impossible. Eventually, I just accepted that this canyon would be my tomb. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Maya said. And I once watched a guy try to fix a plasma leak with duct tape. She stood up and brushed dust off her coveralls. Where's your communicator? Broken in the crash. Why? Maya grinned. Because Admiral Grandpa Smokestack, today is your lucky day. I may not be able to fix my hyperdrive with spare parts and hope, but I can definitely jury-rig a long-range transmitter. Question is, are you ready to swallow that pride of yours? Pyrion was quiet for a long moment. Then he chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. You know what, Maya Rodriguez? I think I am. Wait, how did you know my name? It's on your coveralls. Oh, right. 2 hours later, Maya had cobbled together a working communicator using parts from her ship's emergency kit and some components Pyrion had salvaged from his crash site. The Dragon's ship, it turned out, was buried under 40 years of rock slides and wishful thinking. Are you sure this will work? Pyrion asked, watching Maya connect the final circuit. Absolutely not, Maya replied cheerfully. But it's either this or we both die of old age in this canyon. Ready to call the cavalry? Pyrion nodded and activated the transmitter. His voice, when he spoke into it, carried an authority that made Maya understand why he'd been an admiral. This is Admiral Pyrion Flamewright, Dragon Fleet serial number DFA 7742, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. I am alive, relatively well, and in need of immediate extraction from coordinates. He paused. Maya, what are the coordinates for this charming death trap? Maya rattled off the numbers and Pyrion repeated them. I repeat, this is Admiral Flamewright requesting immediate pickup. And before anyone asks, yes, I'm aware I've been missing for 40 years. We'll discuss it later. The response came within minutes, a voice crackling with static and what sounded like barely controlled panic. Grandfather? Grandfather? Is that really you? We thought you were dead. Pyrion winced. Hello, Blazeus. Yes, it's really me. And we're going to have words about you calling me grandfather on an open channel. The ship that descended from Dust Bowl Prime's murky sky wasn't just big. It was monumentally, ridiculously compensating for something big. Maya had seen corporate dreadnoughts that were smaller. The thing was shaped like a cross between a cathedral and a very angry lizard, tall spires and weapon ports and intimidating-looking protrusions that probably had names like Death Ray and Planet Cracker. Okay, Maya said, craning her neck to watch it land. I'm starting to understand why everyone thinks dragons are extinct. With ships like that, you probably don't have to prove you exist very often. The blazing vengeance was always Blazeus's favorite, Pyrion said fondly. Subtle as a brick through a window, but impressive nonetheless. The landing process alone took 20 minutes and involved enough flame and thunder to wake the dead. When the smoke finally cleared, a ramp descended from the ship's belly with all the ceremony of a royal procession. What emerged made Maya wonder if she should bow, run, or just quietly die of intimidation. Dragons, it turned out, were even more impressive when they weren't stuck in canyons. The one leading the group stood at least 10 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted between gold and bronze in the light. He wore armor that looked like it had been forged by someone who really wanted everyone to know how important the wearer was. Behind him came 6 more dragons, each one looking like they could arm wrestle a battleship and win. Grandfather. The lead dragon's voice boomed across the canyon. By the 7 suns, we thought we'd lost you forever. Hello, Blizus, Pyrion said calmly. You're looking well. Put on some weight, I see. Commander Blizus Scaleheart stopped dead in his tracks, his entourage piling up behind him like a very expensive traffic accident. His massive head swiveled to take in the canyon, the debris from Pyrion's ancient crash, and finally Maya, who gave a little wave. Grandfather, what? Blizus paused, his golden eyes narrowing as they fixed on Maya. Who is this human? Are you being held prisoner? What? No, don't be ridiculous. Pyrion stretched his wings as much as the canyon allowed. Maya here is the reason you're not collecting my bones right now. She fed me and fixed my communicator when she had every reason to save her resources for herself. Maya cleared her throat. Hi there. Maya Rodriguez, freelance cargo hauler and apparently dragon rescue specialist. Nice to meet you all. The dragon stared at her in silence. It was the kind of silence that made Maya wonder if she'd accidentally committed some terrible cultural faux pas. Maybe looking dragons in the eye was considered rude. Maybe she should have brought gifts. Maybe she should have worn better clothes than coveralls held together with patches and hope. You fed him? One of the other dragons asked, sounding genuinely confused. Yeah, I gave him my emergency rations, 3 protein bars. Maya shrugged. Figured nobody should starve alone, you know. More silence. Then Blizus stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Human, do you have any idea who you've been talking to? This is Admiral Pyrion Flamewright, hero of the Vega campaign, conqueror of the Rigel pirates, the dragon who held the Andromeda Gate against impossible odds. Yeah, he mentioned something about being an admiral, Maya said. Mostly we talked about how he crashed here because he couldn't handle his liquor. Pyrion made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been suppressed laughter. Blizus's scales seemed to darken several shades. He told you about the brandy? Oh yeah, went into great detail. Something about Centaurian brandy and not knowing port from starboard. Really, it was quite the story. The assembled dragons looked like they were processing information that challenged their fundamental understanding of the universe. Maya was starting to enjoy herself. Look, she continued, I don't know much about dragon military hierarchy or whatever. But your grandfather is clearly a tough old bird who made a mistake and was too proud to ask for help. It happens to the best of us. The important thing is he's alive and you found him. Blizus looked back and forth between Maya and Pyrion several times. You're treating him like a regular person. Well, yeah, I mean, he's a giant talking lizard from space, which is admittedly pretty weird, but he's still just a person, right? A person who's been stuck in a canyon for 40 years eating whatever he could catch. Mostly small mammals and the occasional mineral deposit, Pyrion added helpfully. Terrible cuisine on this planet. I don't recommend the local wildlife. What happened next could only be described as the most polite military rescue operation in galactic history going completely sideways. Blizus, apparently taking his role as concerned grandson very seriously, immediately ordered his troops to establish a perimeter around the canyon while he began what Maya could only assume was some kind of formal extraction protocol. Grandfather, we need to get you to the medical bay immediately, Blizus announced. 40 years of inadequate nutrition and exposure to primitive conditions require immediate assessment. I'm fine, Blizus. A little thin, perhaps, but hardly dying. Nevertheless, protocol demands. Protocol can demand whatever it likes. I'm not leaving without Maya. Maya, who had been watching this exchange with growing amusement, suddenly found herself the center of attention again. Wait, what now? You saved my life, Pyrion said simply. Dragon honor demands that I ensure your well-being in return. Besides, I rather like having someone around who doesn't treat me like a museum exhibit." Blazeus's scales were definitely shifting toward the darker end of the spectrum. "Grandfather, this human is obviously a primitive scavenger who happened to stumble across you. We can compensate her appropriately and—" "Excuse me," Maya interrupted. "Primitive scavenger? I'll have you know I'm a certified starship engineer with a Class A commercial pilot's license. Just because my ship looks like it was assembled from spare parts in desperation doesn't mean I don't know what I'm doing." "Your ship," said one of the other dragons, "appears to be completely non-functional." "Well, yes, but that's because hyperdrives are ridiculously complex and I don't have access to a proper shipyard. Give me a basic mechanical problem and I'll fix it with whatever's lying around. That's how I got your grandfather's communicator working, in case you forgot." Blazeus looked skeptical. "You repaired draconic technology with human components?" "More like I repaired human components with draconic technology, but yeah, basically. Your grandfather's crash site was a treasure trove of useful parts." That's when the miners showed up. Maya had completely forgotten about Dust Bowl Prime's 3 permanent residents until she heard the whine of approaching hover bikes. 3 figures in environmental suits came racing over the canyon rim, took one look at the massive dragon warship and the collection of armored reptiles, and immediately assumed the worst. "Raiders," shouted the lead miner, a grizzled woman named Beth who looked like she'd been carved from the same rock as the planet. "Corporate raiders with some kind of exotic attack animals." The miners opened fire with mining lasers, which was about as effective against dragon armor as throwing pebbles at a battleship. The dragons, trained for actual military combat, immediately took defensive positions and prepared to return fire with weapons that could level city blocks. Wait, Maya shouted, jumping between the 2 groups with her arms spread wide. Everyone just calm down. "They're not raiders, they're dragons." "Dragons aren't real," Beth yelled back. "I'm literally standing right here," Pyrion said dryly. "Could be some kind of hologram." "Do holograms eat protein bars?" Maya turned to Blazeus, who was looking increasingly agitated. "And you, put the death rays away. They're just scared miners protecting their claim." "Death rays?" Blazeus sounded offended. "These are precision plasma cannons." "I don't care if they're precision unicorn sparklers, don't point them at the locals." What followed was the most surreal diplomatic incident of Maya's life. She found herself mediating between paranoid miners who thought the dragons were corporate mercenaries in very expensive costumes, and equally confused dragons who couldn't understand why the humans were attacking them with mining equipment. The situation reached peak absurdity when Beth demanded proof that the dragons were real, leading to Pyrion demonstrating his flame breath on a nearby rock formation. This convinced the miners that the dragons were real, but also made them think they were being invaded by mythological creatures, which somehow seemed worse. "Look," Maya finally said, sitting down on a rock and rubbing her temples. "Everyone just sit down and let me explain what's going on here." It took 2 hours. 2 hours of explaining dragon history to miners who thought space lizards were the stupidest thing they'd ever heard, and explaining human paranoia to dragons who couldn't understand why anyone would attack strangers without proper declarations of war. By the end of it, Pyrion had dozed off. Blazeus was questioning his life choices, and the miners were arguing about whether they could legally claim salvage rights on a crashed dragon ship. "This is ridiculous," Maya announced. "Blazeus, your grandfather is fine and doesn't need rescuing from anyone except possibly boredom. Beth, the dragons aren't here to steal your rocks. They just want their admiral back. Everyone can go home happy." That's when the Galactic Corporate Consortium fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The GCC fleet didn't announce itself with the dramatic flair of the dragon ship. It simply appeared in orbit like a collection of flying office buildings, with all clean lines and corporate logos and the kind of utilitarian design that screamed, "We're here to extract maximum profit with minimum effort." The lead ship's hail was broadcasted on all frequencies with the kind of obnoxious cheerfulness that made Maya's teeth itch. Greetings, dear inhabitants of Dust Bowl Prime. This is Corporate Extraction Fleet Delta 7 under the command of Director Patricia Hawthorne. We're here to inform you that this system has been purchased by Galactic Corporate Consortium subsidiary Megamine Industries for immediate resource extraction. All current inhabitants have 30 minutes to evacuate before we begin preliminary bombardment. Maya looked up at the ships hanging in the sky like vultures. Preliminary bombardment. Beth spat in the dust. Strip mining. They're going to blast the whole planet into gravel and sift through the pieces for anything valuable. But what about your mining operation? What about it? We've got legal claims, but the GCC's got lawyers. Guess which one wins in corporate court? Blazeus had gone very still, the way predators do right before they pounce. They intend to destroy this world? Yep, Beth said bitterly. Happens all the time. Some corporate survey finds trace elements worth maybe a few thousand credits, and they'll spend millions blowing up a whole planet to get at them. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. Pyrion, can your ship fly? The old dragon shook his massive head. Even if we could dig it out, it would take weeks to make it spaceworthy. What about your grandson's ship? The Blazing Vengeance is a warship, not a transport, Blazeus said slowly. We could take perhaps a dozen passengers. Maya did the math. 3 miners, 7 dragons, and herself made 11. It should work, except... What about everyone else? What everyone else? Blazeus looked confused. The other miners. The research station on the northern continent. The automated weather monitoring posts. Maya pulled out her datapad and started pulling up population records. According to the planetary database, there are at least 47 people on this rock. The GCC evacuation protocol accounts for registered inhabitants only, Blazeus said. Anyone not on the official census is considered expendable. That's horrible. That's business, Beth said grimly. Half the people here are off-the-books prospectors or folks running from something. No legal identity, no rights. Maya looked around at the assembled group. 3 terrified miners, 6 heavily armed dragons, 1 elderly dragon admiral, and herself. Against a corporate fleet designed to turn planets into gravel. Okay, she said slowly. This is insane, but I have an idea. I'm listening, Pyrion said. The GCC isn't expecting resistance. They've probably got some security ships, but they're set up for mining, not military action. Blazeus, how much firepower does your ship pack? Enough to level a small moon. And Beth, how well do you know this planet's geography? Better than my own backyard. Been mapping mineral deposits here for 15 years. Maya grinned. Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to teach these corporate vultures that some rocks bite back. Pyrion chuckled. I do believe I'm starting to like your style, my dear. The plan Maya outlined was completely insane, tactically unsound, and probably suicidal. It was also the only chance they had. The dragons would use their ship's sensor array to locate every GCC mining platform as it deployed. Beth and the other miners would guide them to the planet's unstable geological formations, areas where a precisely placed shot could trigger massive avalanches or rock slides. Meanwhile, Maya would jury-rig a communications array to coordinate with the other scattered inhabitants, organizing them into groups that could hide in the deep cave systems until the coast was clear. The key, Pyrion explained, settling into his old role as tactical advisor, is not to fight their ships directly. We hit their ground operations, make the mining so expensive and difficult that they decide this planet isn't worth the trouble. Guerrilla warfare, Maya nodded. With dragons. I've heard worse plans, Blazeus admitted grudgingly. When? Beth asked. Well, never actually, but I'm sure they exist. The first GCC mining platform touched down 2 hours later, a massive automated complex designed to strip mine a square kilometer in a matter of days. It lasted exactly 17 minutes before a carefully placed shot from the blazing Vengeance triggered a landslide that buried it under several thousand tons of rock. The second platform got the message and tried to set up in what looked like a more stable area. Unfortunately for them, Maya had been in communication with a geologist hiding in the northern caves who informed her that the stable area was actually the thinnest point over a vast underground cavern system. The resulting sinkhole was visible from orbit. 3 days later, Maya sat on a ridge overlooking what used to be the GCC's command center and watched the last corporate transport disappear into hyperspace. The remains of mining equipment lay scattered across the landscape like the world's most expensive garbage dump. Director Hawthorne seemed rather upset when she left, Pyrion observed, settling his bulk down beside her. Yeah, well, losing 6 mining platforms, 2 security corvettes, and a very expensive command module to what she kept calling primitive guerrilla tactics probably looks bad on her performance review. The campaign had been brief but decisive. Every time the GCC tried to establish a foothold, the combined knowledge of the miners and the firepower of the dragons had made their lives miserable. Automated systems mysteriously malfunctioned. Supply drops landed in quicksand. Security patrols got lost in cave systems that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking. By the 3rd day, Director Hawthorne was screaming about unreasonable operating conditions and unacceptable profit margins over every communication channel. When her final mining platform disappeared into a conveniently timed volcanic fissure, she declared the planet economically unfeasible and ordered a full withdrawal. I have to admit, Blazeus said, approaching from the direction of his ship, that was the most unconventional military operation I've ever participated in. Did it work? Maya asked. The GCC has officially classified Dust Bowl Prime as a restricted mining zone due to extreme geological instability and hostile indigenous life forms. They won't be back. Maya grinned. Hostile indigenous life forms? Apparently, Director Hawthorne's reports described the local population as abnormally aggressive rock-dwelling reptiles with advanced weapons technology. She's not wrong, Pyrion chuckled. Though I prefer distinguished military veterans with a strong sense of territorial preservation. The victory celebration that night was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. The miners had broken out their stash of genuine earth whiskey. The dragons had contributed something called Victory Mead. That tasted like liquid starlight, and everyone had spent hours trading increasingly exaggerated stories about their parts in the campaign. But as the festivities wound down, Maya found herself facing a problem she hadn't expected. Her ship was fixed, courtesy of some extremely advanced dragon engineering techniques, but now she had to figure out what came next. I've been thinking, Pyrion said as they watched the sunrise paint the canyon walls gold and red. This planet could use a permanent diplomatic presence, someone to help mediate between the miners and any other dragons who might pass through. You thinking of staying? I am indeed. 40 years in this canyon taught me that retirement isn't nearly as appealing as I thought it would be. But it also taught me that there's more to life than military glory. He looked at her sideways. Of course, a good diplomat needs reliable transportation. Maya raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. The Dragon Fleet has decided that humanity is more interesting than they initially thought. They're going to need someone who understands both cultures to help with future relations. And that someone is me? Well, you did just prove that one human with 3 protein bars and a bad attitude can organize a successful planetary defense. That's exactly the kind of diplomatic experience we need. Maya looked out at the horizon, where her ship sat next to the massive bulk of the blazing Vengeance. Around the landing area, she could see Beth and the other miners working alongside dragon engineers to repair the damage from the corporate attack. It was crazy. It was impossible. It was probably going to get her killed. All right, she said finally. But I wanted in writing that I'm not responsible for any more drunk admirals crashing into things. Deal. 2 weeks later, Maya launched from Dust Bowl Prime in the Rusty Bucket, her cargo hold loaded with the first official diplomatic pouch from the draconic Stellar Armada to the human colonial authority in over 3 centuries. Behind her flew an honor guard of 6 dragon fighters, because apparently that was how dragons said thank you. As she watched the planet shrink in her rear display, Maya couldn't help but laugh. A month ago, she'd been a broke cargo hauler with expired protein bars and a dying ship. Now she was humanity's first dragon diplomat, with a pension plan and her own squadron of escort fighters. Her communicator crackled to life. Diplomatic Courier Rodriguez, this is Honor Guard Leader Skorkus. We're picking up a distress signal from the Vega system. Looks like someone's having trouble with space pirates. Maya grinned and plotted a course for Vega. Copy that, Skorkus. Let's go see what kind of trouble we can get into. Behind her, 6 dragon fighters formed up in perfect formation, and Maya Rodriguez, former space trucker turned interstellar diplomat, flew off toward her next adventure, wondering how exactly her life had gotten so wonderfully weird.